Yeah, we're in Eden Court in Inverness, and we've just had our first proper dress, which has been very interesting, seeing the things that work and things that don't work, and then making a lot of changes once you realise what the set is as well, and making kind of scenes fit the set in different ways. So that's a lot of the stuff that we've been doing. I mean, the set kind of moves. It goes from a kind of sort of fragmented, sort of general, every man's practice flat, which, as all the different characters come in and we learn their stories, kind of splits up into the component parts of a kind of kitchen and a wall and a window and those kind of things.
I suppose the first sort of impetus for the design is that we weren't going to describe something in a naturalistic way. But the most important thing was that we weren't trying to describe a real space, we were trying to describe the psychological space in a way. The space that these people might hope for, or where the common experiences that they will have could happen in. So it needed to be quite neutral in a way, but still be meaningful. And we wanted it to look quite institutionalised, and it's almost like a kit that you could have, you know, pulled out of some giant warehouse somewhere. But the fragmentation of it is partly a solution and partly to describe what's happening in these people's minds.
There's a central part where we felt that the kind of characters needed to escape their own reality. So I'm not going to tell you that, you have to come and see the show, but there's a kind of escape fantasy part in it. But of course, within the lives of these characters, they can never stay for long in the kind of beautiful fantasy, and the reality starts to kind of kick into that.
I wanted to make the costumes just feel like clothes that young people would wear, so there's lots of references to sort of, you know, streetwear and the clothes that the actors wore, actually, you know, sort of really respecting their own styles, because they had so much to do with developing the characters that I felt that we ought to reflect what they wore as well. But the X-rays, the idea was to do with vulnerability really and exposure. Yeah, and that so that you see their very insides exposed on their clothes, like their clothes are exposing that, but then they have elements of clothing that are slightly armour-like or padding or protective, so it's to do with being exposed and then trying to cover that up.
One of the big things was walking into the rehearsal room on the first day and seeing kind of 14 young people in a corner going, my God, they're so young. You know, we've got such a long journey to go on. By
the nature of the number of characters, the stories could only be really touched upon in many ways, and that kind of served our purpose, actually. So there's the stories kind of flare up briefly, rub against each other, ones skim against each other, and there's echoes with that throughout the piece, but it's not really the grand narrative. It's not a, you know, it's quite piecemeal, quite isolated stories or non-stories in a way. So it's been an intriguing way to work.
And the real highlight for me has been the way that David is kind of continually trying to understand what the piece is that he's writing, and writing better and better and better, and making it more and more honed.
I'd keep going in with new stuff. If it didn't work, I'd retreat and, you know, try and rejig it. I mean, I'm trying to think of how many pages I would have written for this. I must have written about 500, 600 pages. You know, it's going to end up about 60, but it's been a constant refinement, going in and finding out things about the characters, because the actors are finding things out about themselves as well. And one of the difficulties of the world that we encountered was that there's a lot of pain and misery, a lot of hidden lives, a lot of stories that aren't told, a lot of people who don't know their stories or don't want to face their stories, understandably, because of what's happened to them through abuse, neglect, abandonment, parent death, not getting on with their parents, stuff like that. So there was quite a big gap between what people hid and what I wanted to have them say. So I found it very hard for the characters to speak, because in this world, the professionals talk about the stories because they're the ones who deal with it, as they do the young people, but again, it's not very present. And one social worker said to us that it's very, very rare that anyone will talk directly about their past life, of what had happened to them. So the writing was pretty difficult, because there's not a great deal of backstory, and we wanted to, that actually became the theme of it, or one of the propulsions of the narrative was about people searching for a narrative, searching for their own story, looking for the gaps in their own life, and that became, I guess, the presiding narrative of the piece.